Welcome to the Chico Creates podcast, where we interview local artists, musicians, and makers from here in Chico, California. My name is Lauren Meichtry, and you may have heard me back in episode 5. And today, I'll be turning the mic around and interviewing our usual host, Ciara Barsotti. Welcome, Ciara.
Thank you.
Ciara is the host of the Chico Creates podcast, as well as a painter who makes exuberant abstract art and fantastical landscape paintings. She's a mother to one adorable human child and 2 cats and lives with them and her husband in Chico, California. Her work is fueled by black coffee, popcorn, and a little bit of magic. So, thank you for allowing me to interview you today. I'm very excited to be back.
Thank you so much for agreeing to interview me.
Totally.
Folks have been asking for an interview with me, and I'm like, I'm not going to interview myself, so you seemed like the perfect person to interview me. So,
well, I'm happy to be here, and I'm really excited to learn more about you today, and for our audience to learn more about you as well. So, to get started, just tell us a little about yourself, maybe.
So I've been running this podcast for a couple of years. Most folks, it's actually been really cool to just be out in the wild and have people go, "Do you do the podcast?" And I'm like, "Yes, that's me." So I'm like Chico famous, which is really fun. It's more about me. I recently quit my job. It's not recent anymore. Back in October, to be a stay-at-home mom to that one adorable child mentioned in the bio. And that has been awesome. It has also meant a lot less time for art, but that is okay because it is a very fleeting moment, toddlerhood. And he's a great inspiration for a lot of what I hope to create next. And other than that, I have been loving my garden. We've been in our house for a couple of years now, and it's really established and flourishing, and that's really fun. I've been trying to bike more. I was really inspired by my talk with Jimmy Brobeck a couple episodes ago. He bikes everywhere. I'm like, I want to do that, even though it's super hot. Although, as we're recording this today, it's really nice out. So
yeah, it's a surprising Chico day.
It is. Yeah.
Well, awesome. How long have you lived in Chico, and what's brought you here or kept you here, would you say?
Yeah. So, this most recent stint in Chico has probably been, it's been 5 years now. We moved back in the summer of 2020. And before that, we were living in Virginia, for my husband's postdoc, and then we were living in Santa Cruz for 5 years for my husband's PhD. So I've just been following him around the country, basically. And we met up in Paradise, and my family moved to Paradise when I was in junior high. And my husband and I met at Coffee's On. We were both working up there, which is now Starbucks. But the real ones know and remember Coffee's On. We did a year. We lived a year in Chico after we got married before we moved on to Santa Cruz. So, but my husband's born and raised here. I grew up in Davis, so this Northern California Valley has kind of always been part of my background.
Definitely. And now that you're in Chico, do you have any favorite spots you like to hang out at or visit, or places that bring you inspiration in town maybe?
Yes. Yeah. Well, I love Equilateral. They're our neighborhood coffee shop. They get lots of shout outs on here and they are awesome. And I love that they share the space with the 1078 because there's always art to see there, and I love that. We love to walk in that neighborhood too, Barber neighborhood. I love being downtown. My kid loves the Children's Museum, so we might get there a little early and shop around to the shops that happen to be open before 10, and then we usually end up at Ital Imports after the museum too, because that's the best way to get him to leave the museum is to promise that we can go pick out a rock.
Gotta love a rock.
Oh yeah,
a good rock.
Oh yeah, we both have our respective rock collections.
That's awesome.
Yes, yeah.
Very cool. Yeah, those are some good spots in town, definitely. So I think a lot of our audience is really curious to know just kind of the background of the podcast and what started the podcast for you.
Yeah, so it was a couple of years kind of brewing in my mind, and it all kind of came together before I was really ready for it, which is often the best way to like actually start things, is to just jump right in before you're fully ready, because otherwise no one would ever start anything. And, you know, my husband kept saying, like, you should start that podcast. Like, you should interview people in town, because there's so many people to interview. You know, and I could have focused on just artists, but I really like, I know artists, and to me, like, that mysterious creative type is musicians. Like, that's how I can kind of understand how people look at art. They're like, how do you do that? That's how I feel about musicians. So I'm like, I want to interview musicians too. And then I was like, let's just expand it to all the creatives in town, and then we'll be interviewing people till kingdom come. And it started when I was in Equilateral and I saw a friend, and she mentioned that her husband had just started working at a company in town that had like a podcast studio and everything. And I was like, well, I'll ask about that. And that was Metric. That was where we started. That's where you were interviewed, at Metric Studios. And yeah, that they really like believed in the project and really worked with me for a long time. And it was like, you know, so much love to them. The only reason we moved on was just for financial reasons. You know, I'm not out here to make money on this project, and it's the generous donations of people who are like allowing it to happen. And the recession hit and everything, so I kind of lost some footing there. And I also really wanted to be able to do more with what I had, and so now we're here at the Maker Radio space, which is awesome. It's a lot more hands-on, which does make it cheaper. But it's such a great creative space, because they have their, you know, What is Art open mics every Thursday, and there's just a lot of creative energy in this space, and it's really cool. So yeah, so that's kind of how we ended up here.
Yeah, that's awesome. Is there something from your journey with this podcast that's really surprised you, or something that you didn't expect, you know, when you started making the podcast?
Yeah, I think I have loved getting feedback from people, like all the positive feedback. No one's ever said like, I hate your podcast. Like, that doesn't happen. But like, you know, my mom is such a loyal listener. She always tells me when she listens and like, oh, I loved when you guys talked about this. But then not just my mom, it's like people on the street, like I mentioned, and so many artists are really grateful to have a platform too. And yeah, I just think the most surprising thing is to see how much it has meant to this community, and that's really why I want to see it continue, because I know it means a lot to Chico. And you know, podcasts are a really great platform for a lot of things. So I'm happy to have made it this far.
And like you mentioned, it just kind of connects people together more. And I've noticed that after I was on the podcast, it's connected me to a couple other people, you know, and people who'd heard the podcast too were like, oh, I had no idea that was your style, or that's your background. And so because Chico is kind of like a little, like it's a small city, but you know, people do know each other here pretty well, and it's pretty well connected. And so word of mouth spreads pretty well here. And so yeah, by sharing your story on the podcast, it leads to a lot of other connections with other artists and creatives, I've found. And I think a lot of other artists and musicians on the podcast have kind of had a similar experience that I've met from the podcast. So.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And there have been so many connections made, like in the recording studio too. Like, you know, people at the end of every episode, my guests are like, oh, you should interview this person, or like, oh, I didn't know you knew this person, or, you know, so it's like making our small town feel smaller in the most cozy way possible.
Yeah, very much so. And I know you had a little bit of an anniversary celebration. Yeah. Do you want to share anything about that? Or
Yeah. So after 1 year, we did a live recording, which it was a blast. It was a lot of work. People were like, please do it again. And I was like, no, so much work. We are actually with this episode, we're closing our second season. And we're not doing a big hurrah or anything like we did for 1 year. I do think 1 year is a pretty big milestone. So, Yeah, I mean, especially now that we're here in the Maker Radio space, we could potentially open it up to live shows in the future, and have that be a much more seamless and easy transition than like, we rented the Chico Women's Club and like, they have food and stuff here. So I think that would be a lot easier to do. It's just what my bandwidth has been.
Sure.
So, but yeah, that was, I've never run an event like that. And it was really fun to do, but it was also a lot of work.
Sure. Yeah. But it's good to celebrate too.
Totally.
It's a big
Yes.
accomplishment to start something from the ground, from scratch, and then watch it grow and watch it, connect to so many people in the community too. So
totally,
definitely we're celebrating.
Yes. So. Yeah. And it was a good way for more people to know about the show too, having it advertised and being at the Chico Women's Club and everything. So yeah,
definitely. So I'm going to switch gears a little
Sure.
and go back to just you, the artist, Ciara, the artist. So if you want to talk a little bit about maybe your art background and kind of a little bit of your art style and kind of go into that a little bit.
Yeah, sure. Yeah. So I was an artsy kid. I was always drawing. I had sketchbooks. I still have all my sketchbooks. I was always sketching something. When I was a kid, it was all horses. In high school, it was furries and dragons. And then I started to get more into like painting and like landscape, and I fell in love with the desert, and that was all after taking a couple of classes at the community college in Santa Cruz, Cabrillo College. I took some painting classes, and that really like broke things open for me. I love acrylic paint because it dries so fast, and I'm such a like impatient person. I can't wait for oil paints to dry. I need to have it dry before I start my next layer. Like that's just the way I work. So yeah, it's mostly been a lot of self-taught exploration, and then I do highly recommend though taking classes, just because you learn techniques that are such great little shortcuts to get you where you want to go faster if someone's teaching you rather than trying to reinvent the wheel. I know there's some weird like biases one way or the other about being self-taught versus having like a full education or whatever that even means. But yeah, so I'm kind of a hybrid. I did get an AA almost in studio art, and then I decided to quit halfway through my last semester, so I just have a liberal arts degree. That's what I do. I like can stick with something for 2 years and then I'm done. So, I made it that far. But yeah, so these days, my work, I mentioned in my bio, is exuberant landscapes and abstracts. And I still love the desert, still love to paint the desert. I love the shapes of rocks and the colors in the desert. And I've recently, gone from really like big, bold acrylic paintings back to like smaller watercolors, which is kind of where I lived in my early 20s, late teens. And I've been working on a project called the Sacred Southwest Oracle Deck, which I just finished all of the art for the cards on, and I'm very excited about that.
Congratulations.
Thank you. Yeah, so 36 cards, the art's complete. At some point, I'll put them all up on my website to show, and a couple years down the line, maybe it'll be ready to purchase. It'll be published somewhere, but yeah, that's been a long-term project, and it's been a good project for me because like I said, I tend to have kind of a flash in the pan attitude towards things. Like I got to catch it while the inspiration's there. But this has been such a long, drawn out project. I've proven to myself that I can stick with something for a long time. So yeah.
Yeah, and for the Oracle deck, where do you get your inspiration for that, or what was the start of that journey?
Yeah. So it's called Sacred Southwest. The tagline is the flora, fauna, and phenomena of the American desert. So I've just always kind of had a love affair with the desert. As much as I hate the heat, I love the desert. I've got ancestry from the desert. My great grandma grew up on the North Rim, or she lived on the North Rim of the Grand Canyon. My grandma was raised there. And she was also a landscape painter. So it's just in my blood to paint the desert. And the inspiration for the cards was really just the, flora, fauna, and phenomena that sparked my interest. So all the gorgeous plants and animals. And then, you know, phenomena are things like the singing sands and the moving stones. And, you know, there's bioluminescence in the desert. There's even a desert Sasquatch. There's, you know, lights in the sky. There's lots of UFO sightings out in the desert because you just got nothing but sky. So, yeah, just kind of, it's just a perfect little collection of all the things I love about the desert.
Oh, that's so cool.
Yeah.
I'm really excited to see the final collection all together because I know I've been hearing you work on it before, you know, over the last few years you've been making a long-term project of it. So it's going to be really cool.
Yeah.
So you said watercolor is one of the main mediums you really...
watercolor. So I do pen and ink drawings and then I watercolor it. Yeah. And I tend to do pretty pigmented watercolor. You know, I think I would like gouache, but I just got so used to using watercolor, I haven't made the switch yet.
Sure.
But yeah.
And what led you to kind of get into watercolor? Just something?
Yeah, so that was something I started with when I actually took classes as a teenager at the Paradise Art Center, and I took a colored pencil class there for a long time. And I always had a hard time breaking out of like the control of the colored pencil. You know, even inking colored pencil is a really great like in between because you can erase it to some extent, you can cover it up a little bit, you can blend it, whereas pen and ink is like too permanent, and then watercolor or paint was like not controlled enough. So it is kind of ironic that I got way into watercolor, which is notoriously a difficult to control medium. But you know, I had sworn off acrylic paint until I took that class at Cabrillo because I was using really cheap like kids acrylic paints. This is a great example of like the tools make a difference. I highly recommend golden acrylics if you're interested in getting into acrylic painting. It just has a really nice feel. None of the colors are like that weird watery texture that you get with some of the cheaper kids acrylics, which is like, now that I have a kid, I was like, oh, I'm going to let him use all my art supplies. And now I just see how free he is with everything. And I'm like, this is great, but this stuff's expensive. So there's a balance to strike there too.
But if he's using it, you know, it's still positive.
Yes. Yeah. I do care about the quality of his art supplies though. So like some of them I'm like, we're not going to get this one again.
That's fair.
Yeah.
That's fair. So
I forget what the original question was at this point, but
that's all right. Yeah, I think we were talking about materials and things.
Yeah,
so that pretty much, I think answers the question.
Yep.
Yeah. So for your studio, a lot of people have visited at Open Studios, and back when we first met, it was through Open Studios. Do you have any rituals or kind of what's your process when you're working in your studio to make art? Yeah.
So I have like a before kids and after kids, before Hazel and after Hazel. So before Hazel, I would like to be in the right headspace to make, which meant I would, you know, do some meditation, put on some music that kind of fit the mood of what I was going for. I really like having a designated space to work rather than having to pull everything out like on a kitchen table. It's so nice to like be able to leave your easel and your palette somewhere in the house. So we have like a little breakfast nook that I kind of turned into my studio, and that's worked out great for me. But since Hazel, I actually did a series that I had up at the Chai House recently, which is all abstract work. And that was just very opportunistic. Like when he was really little, he would nap multiple times a day and maybe for only 15 minutes at a time. So it was like, if he went down and was asleep, I would run in there and like paint. And that was always my priority. It was like the house comes second, painting comes first. So, yeah. And fortunately for me, I tend to like run out of steam pretty quick. So if I can get a good hour or two in of painting, I'm done for the day. So then I am able to go do other things, which is useful for having a life.
Definitely. Do you find like you work better at home, like in your studio, or like when you're out and about? Is there like a difference you notice when you make art
Yeah.
outside of your studio?
Yeah, that's a really good question. Yeah. It's different, I would say, because not only are you limited by the materials you can bring with you when you're out and about, and I actually did like assemble a whole art box out of one of my great grandma's like old toiletry trunks, like the old Samsonite ones that you see in thrift stores sometimes, and I can do pretty good with that. So I've got like tons of markers and my little travel watercolors and some Tombow markers and colored pencils and everything. And but the work is different. It's I don't go in with a plan necessarily when I'm out and about. It's really just like there to move my hand and to move my brain with the art, versus working on something specific. One exception, I do pet portraits too sometimes, and I will take those to the In Motion Fitness Cafe when I have Hazel in the daycare. I won't paint there, but I will do my sketching and pen work there. So
Cool. Yeah, definitely environment can definitely shape
yes,
kind
totally
of the art people make. So
totally.
great. What is the best part about being an artist in Chico, would you say?
Well, something that comes up a lot and that I've noticed in myself is people aren't necessarily able to make a living at art in Chico. There isn't the buyer base that would be nice to have especially for as many artists as we have. We really need like all of Chico to be only shopping local in order to sustain that. But so there's a lot of folks who are there's a term like slashies where they're like artists slash this. Everyone's kind of doing multiple things, which I kind of wish that wasn't the case, but to flip this around, the best part about being an artist in Chico is that people stay here for a reason beyond their career, which I think is actually really valuable. The kinds of people who stay in a place for reasons beyond just making money are the kinds of people you want in your community. They're there for the community. They're there for the town. They're there because they have connections. And that's just something I've seen for myself, and all the artists I've interviewed are like, we love Chico. So it's, even though it is a college town and you do get some, like transients where the students come and go and stuff like that, there is a really solid base of people here who are here for as long as life will have them here. And that's really special. Like, I feel like in bigger cities, you get a lot of people who come and go for one reason or another. And there's just a really solid core group of people here, which is invaluable.
That's true. Yeah. Let's see. Do you have any ongoing or upcoming projects that you're excited about?
Yes. So yeah, I mentioned the Oracle deck. That's definitely been like the project that's taken most of my creative time. But next, I'm not 100% sure what I want to do next, as far as I'm going to be writing the guidebook, but as far as like the art piece, I would love to possibly get back into graphic novels and comics. I would love to maybe get back into children's book illustrating and authoring. I've illustrated a couple, but I haven't authored and illustrated. And I've got some ideas for that. I also would just love to get back into throwing paint around big canvases again. I miss that, working really small with the watercolor. That definitely serves a purpose and like scratches an itch, but I'm ready to go big again. So we'll see what comes. I'm definitely like in a limbo right now, but
definitely. But exciting though, because you're like at a crossroads where it can go in a lot of different directions, right?
Yes, so. There's like endless possibilities before me. Yeah,
definitely. I was wondering if you had one piece of advice you'd like to share to fellow artists, to people that maybe want to dip their toe into creativity or anything maybe that you've taken away from your past experiences?
Yeah. I think probably the best advice is just to keep making art. Just keep doing it. Because, another thing at this point, since quitting my day job, I found I didn't realize until I was in it that I was also quitting my art business, which I had connected those things, obviously, because they're both, part of our capitalistic system to try to make money. But like once I was free of any obligation to make money, I felt like I was then free to set the business side to the side for now. I feel really grateful that I have that privilege, that, my husband is willing and able to support our family. But at the same time, I have, and another thing is I've always felt like I needed to have outside accountability to make art. And so running a business was like my reason to make art. And I've found that I still have a reason to make art, it's, and that's been really refreshing. It's like, I can just make art for myself. Wow, what a concept, And so like, as far as advice goes, whatever your reason for making art is, your motivation is going to change. You're going to have good days and bad days. Sometimes what you make is going to be total garbage, but you've got to get through the garbage to get to the good stuff. And some days you're going to be like in the studio and just on cloud 9. And those are the days we're chasing. So, and you can't get there unless you're making art as much as possible.
Absolutely.
So.
You got to start somewhere.
That's right. Yep.
That's cool. Is there anything we haven't covered today that you just want to share, or about your past experience, or things for the future, or anything?
Yeah, I think I just want to say thank you to Chico for supporting the show as well as you have. I just love hearing the feedback from people who are listening, and like, I don't really pay much attention to my numbers because it doesn't seem to reflect numbers are numbers. When you have someone coming up to you and telling you that they love your show, like that's why we do it, right? that's the reason. So thank you to Chico for being so supportive of, and I was saying earlier that it's hard to make a living as an artist in Chico. There's still so much like emotional support. There's so many programs. There's so many people that want you to make art, even if they can't afford to pay you to make art. And that's super important. Like I was saying with that piece of advice, like, it doesn't matter what your reasons are, just make the art. Like, if you can make money at it, that's a bonus.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Well, thank you so much for sharing, Ciara, and being on the podcast in the opposite seat today.
Yes, it's so weird being over here.
How was it?
That was good. Yeah. I feel like, well, obviously I did talk a lot more than usual, so.
But hopefully our viewers enjoyed learning a little bit more about you and your art process. And so thank you. And
yeah.
Have a great rest of your day, everyone. And to all our viewers, take care, and
we'll see you around town.
The Chico Creates podcast is presented by and recorded at Maker Radio in Chico, California. Hosted and produced by Ciara Barsotti. Production engineering and editing by Solomon Perillo. Theme song is Take Your Time by Lorna Such. We now have official merchandise: hats, totes, mugs, shirts for the whole family, and more at ChicoCreates.com. Sport your support of the show with official Chico Creates podcast merch. This show is made possible by community members like you. I would personally like to thank Melissa Thede, David LaShawn Montoya, Jonathan Greenfield, Heather Leveroni, Kaylee Huber, Troy German, Kate Thurkill, Bonnie Pipkin, Lindsay Hook, Bree Epley, Scott Grisette, and Johan Caro for their continued financial support of this project. If you'd like to join them, head over to ChicoCreates.com and scroll to the bottom of the page to become a show supporter. Thanks again for listening, and we'll see you around town.